we come to our guest presenter, Janet Jeffers, whose work, if you don't follow her on the usual socials, Facebook and Instagram, I suggest you do because her work is phenomenally amazing. Uh, Known her for a little while. I had the honor to actually work with her on a Maryland Masters series we did for the Maryland Photography Alliance. Actually, she was our first, and it's still in rotation. So if you get a chance to go to the MPA website, go to the Maryland Masters tab and download this. This is actually very interesting. So without ado, I would like to bring in Janet.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm gonna start sharing my screen. So, and we'll get started. Um, Thank you again for inviting me to speak with you this evening. I've made fine art photography my full-time vocation for over 15 years now. I can't believe it's been that long, but I've been taking pictures for much longer than that, going back to my college years. I was a graphic designer and eventually gave that up in order to pursue this activity that I love the most. I'm very fortunate I get to do this. And I'm also really grateful that I also get to talk with other photographers, see the work everybody else makes, and hopefully share some of what I've learned with you. So, as was mentioned earlier, before the evening started, I do still have a studio space in the Bromo Seltzer Arts Tower in Baltimore. The building is still open to the public every Saturday from 11 till 4. I am not there every weekend, but if you ever are in town on a Saturday and you want to drop in, just send me an email, send me a note, and I'll let you know if I'm going to be there. It'd be great to see you. We welcome visitors. It's a lot of fun. You get to take a tour of the clock room. I think that's an extra $8, $10, something like that. But you can walk through the whole building, see all the artists in their studios. So it's a cool place. So, as a photographer, one of my favorite practices is exploring found abstraction in both the natural world and the man made world. And by found abstraction, I'm talking about subjects that are found and captured as I discover them just out in the wild, not arranged or staged scenes that are composed in a studio or composited like collages. Those are other forms of photographic abstraction that are perfectly valid for exploring. They're not my specialty, so for our purposes tonight, I'll be talking about found abstraction. And this photo, an example of found abstraction in the natural world. This is a detail of some ice that is just almost not quite covering a nearby stream. Down here, I live in Anne Arundel County, and one of the trail networks that I like to hike on, I look for ice in the winter, and this is a macro close-up abstract of some of that ice. So, what is abstract photography? I like this quote a lot. It's tongue in cheek, but it gets us started talking about abstraction. Here's the acid test. If you look at a photo and there's a video or a voice inside you that says, "What is it?" Well, there you go. It's an abstract photograph. And so, yeah, it sounds simple, but it can be trickier to create successful abstraction than one thinks, considering how simple the concept is. Let's define abstraction first. Abstraction in art is generally defined as expressing ideas and emotions by using elements such as color and line without attempting to create a realistic picture. So, abstraction in its simplest sense, applied to photography, means taking things out of their context by removing whatever gives them context. So, we're photographing a portion of a scene, isolating it from its environment by zeroing in on some visual aspect, whether it's color, shape, form, texture, the photographer is then able to create a unique perception of what might be a familiar object. So the result is often an illusion. This photo is actually the hood of a car in a junkyard. And there's a little gap between where the hood meets the body of the car, and it's apparently been in some sort of fiery incident. It's all burned, and the colors of the rust and the burned surface and the shadows created, it sort of gave me the illusion of a bit of like a landscape, with that dark stripe being like a body of water. But who knows what illusion that might create for somebody else. So photography's origins are really aimed at representing traditional realism. Photography was meant to capture things exactly as they appeared, perfectly realistic detail, instead of how painting is more, it's trickier to make sure that you have things exact. But rather than having this intention of giving a faithful recreation of a scene, an abstract photograph aims to capture the viewer's imagination by instead making them ask questions. So the most effective abstract photos invite the viewer to have an experience, perhaps invite a conversation rather than just showing or telling. Other visual artists, like, before I go on to that, this I'll explain a little of the mystery behind each of these photographs as I move along. This is a detail of the patterns in the mud flats, which are now sand, in Death Valley National Park. And the sun was going down and just creating these really strong, beautiful shadows, just looking straight down at the ground at these really delicate sand formations in the mud flats. That's what we're looking at here. So other visual artists like painters and sculptors can build an abstract creation from their imagination. They seem to just come up with it from scratch. But photographers, we need to find one that already exists around us and then isolate it by capturing it on film or on a digital sensor. And this requires not only the technical knowledge of how to do that, but also, and more importantly, a kind of imagination, a different kind of imagination, this eye that looks beyond the real. For a photographer, the challenge is to see differently. And this is why I kind of like to think of abstraction as a process of invention. When we're creating abstraction, we're engaging our imaginations, taking something familiar or commonplace and making an altogether new object of it. So that result can be an illusion when your senses tell you one thing while the reality is different. So if you Google abstract photograph, you come up with a lot of images that would not truly, strictly be considered abstract in the purest sense of the term. A lot of people call an image abstract by mistake. I think it can be easily misunderstood. And it takes us back to that quote that I opened with: if the subject is quickly recognizable, the photograph is not truly an abstract. Like a subject that's blurred or shown in an uncommon light or manipulated in a way that distorts it. Those are methods of achieving some abstraction, but if the subject, there's still no doubt as to what the original subject is, it's not truly and purely abstract. If you can point to a photograph and say, oh, that's a dog, or oh, that's a flower, then it is not technically purely abstract, even though it may contain elements of abstraction. This photograph it's on the brink. I think most people can tell that it's a seashell, very up close, scallop shell. Those tiny, tiny grains of sand are very magnified. By using that technique of getting very close and the focus on the forms and the texture, I'm using some elements of abstraction, even if the photograph might not be purely abstract. By by the same token, it's not really enough to say that a photograph is successful as an abstract just because the subject is unrecognizable. In fact, I've seen a lot of photographs that they're unrecognizable, but they don't succeed as artistic abstracts to my eye because they aren't about anything else except for the unrecognizability. And the point is not just to make something unrecognizable. A successful abstract is such because it's not about the subject, but again, about those graphic qualities like line, color, shape, pattern, rhythm. But even more importantly, it's also about the more intangible qualities like mood, harmony, mystery, illusion. And it goes back again to the part of that dictionary definition that I mentioned earlier, the part that's a little bit easier to overlook, and it's the part that says expressing ideas and emotions. So if you can identify an emotion or an idea that you're trying to convey in a photograph, you're taking the full intention of abstraction to heart rather than just trying to make something unrecognizable, for the sake of guess what this is. The illusion component of abstraction can really engage the viewer's brain, their imagination. So, the idea of abstraction, plays with our senses and it challenges our assumptions about reality. It has the power to sort of wake up our mind and shake up our perception, possibly even taking the viewer to a new experience. This photograph is of a it's a big rusty metal, I don't know what. I don't know what the actual piece of machinery is called. It's a big wheel I found in a train yard. And I just loved the play of the color and the texture with the curve of that wheel. And I really isolated it, just that portion from the rest of what was around it, to focus on that, those shapes, that curve, and those colors. And there's a texture there that even though it's metal, it's very, very granular. And somehow the appearance almost reminds me a little bit of fabric or felt. And when I glanced at it one day, it gave me the appearance of like a close-up of a hat, like a felt hat, and where the brim is at the bottom and the top part. So again, just shaking up our perceptions. So since abstraction does exist in degrees, it's up to each of us to determine what level of abstraction that we want to explore. And the truth is, whether you use it a little bit or a lot, abstraction is a really great vehicle for seeing that can help you strengthen your visual stories. It can help you clarify your point of view and sort of expand your storytelling toolkit. Since every photograph is abstract to at least some small degree, ultimately the question is not whether you're going to use abstraction, it's how you're going to use it. So abstraction at its best is, when it's employed mindfully, it's not a gimmick, but it's a tool. So, even if you don't consider yourself an abstract photographer, by being aware of and using some of these principles of abstraction, you can compose even a more representational scene using these elements more thoughtfully, and you can select them to sort of form your own chosen emotional message. As an example, this image, again, has, some pretty recognizable elements in those clouds, and they are over a hill of grain. This is out on the Colorado-Kansas border. And I shot this in a number of different ways, and this was probably the most abstract leaning picture that I took of that scene. And the photo's purpose was not to document the cloud or the hill of grain, but to explore the relationship between those two shapes in terms of the forms, the color contrast, the scale, the texture. So as a result, the grain hills become a little bit more mysterious. When I composed the scene to leave out, there's some grain silos nearby. The origin of those patterns becomes less clear, leaving the viewer to take in the patterns and the colors and wonder at where they come from. It almost looks more like sandstone without the, without the contextual clue of those silos. So it's a good thing to remember that, relationships between the elements in a photo, like the clouds and the grain hills, they can help create a mood or a story. So, thinking about the elements in a composition, how they relate to one another, is another degree of abstraction that you can use. I think a little bit of context for putting abstraction kind of into, sort of a hierarchy or, of increasing or decreasing abstraction or straightforwardness of photographs. I'll run through these kind of quickly. The four main goals of creating photographs. I think it's really helpful to consider these categories. So going from the most straightforward to the most esoteric. Documentation, you're simply showing the subject as it is, as it looks to anybody who sees it. It's recording for the sake of faithfully representing the subject. It's the creation of a visual record based purely on the function of identifying the subject. It concentrates on the whole rather than the parts, and it's the total opposite of abstraction, which aims to surprise. So examples would be catalog photos, real estate photography. Here's where you're really trying to show and tell what something is. Number two, capturing an expressive moment. It's a step away from documentation. You're capturing a moment in time in a representational way, and the emphasis is still on being faithful to the subject as it is in documentation, but with an additional goal of expressing a personal vision or style. So you're capturing an elusive moment or a unique subject in a way that starts to convey your style. Examples would be things like sunset photos, portraits, street photography. In this, you're moving away from just showing and telling, and you're starting to get a bit more into a story. You're telling something. Creating artistic photographs, taking a step further. We're creating images that are interpretations of reality, but not necessarily documentations of reality. The goal here, you're getting more into the goal of creating art, with the emphasis on the artist's perception and their emotional response to the scenes and subjects, not so focused on representing reality in a factual manner. Although factual manner can be part of what's happening. So the goal here is getting more into interpretation, creating art and storytelling. Some editorial photography for advertising is a good example of this. A lot of the photos that we see in publications like National Geographic would be another. So you're telling stories again. Creating abstract photographs is, the furthest down down up the scale. We're creating images that make no reference to the specific subject or location. The goal is purely creating art to show the artist's perception of the world and what they see in the mind's eye. The abstract image is a window into what they see that no one else does. The focus is more on concepts and ideas, the parts rather than the whole. The idea is not to sell or document, it is to surprise and evoke a sense of mystery. And here we're going beyond showing and telling, and instead maybe asking the viewer to have more of an experience. So abstracts can be challenging. They do tend to demand a higher level of effort from the viewer to be appreciated. The goal is to create originality, to show something new, something we may have seen before, but not in the way that it's being shown now. Something we may have passed by but never noticed. So the goal is a new interpretation or an illusion. For instance, in this case of this photo, it could be metal that looks like water. Oh, my dog is visiting, sorry. This photo was taken in Terlingua, Texas, outside of Big Bend National Park. There was a shipping container that was burned and damaged and rusting, and it had all these incredible textures and colors happening in the metal. And I just explored the surface of that container for a while and found all these different plays of shape and color. And the illusion in this to me is that this metal surface that's rusting and looks more like water to me. This looks more like the patterns and ripples in water. One should not only photograph things for what they are, but for what else they are. Minor White. So there are various elements that can be employed to create a successful abstract. So I thought I'd run through some basic elements that to pay attention to define and achieve abstraction. Light and shadow. Lighting, of course, is a really important factor in any photograph, but it can be used for really dramatic effect for abstract photos. Lighting has the ability to emphasize and dramatize subject matter. The use of silhouettes, of backlighting, strong light can create shadows and dramatic elements in the frame. So consider the shapes of shadows or the relations of shapes of dark and light to one another. Shadows can be really powerful. I've seen really great abstracts that consist almost entirely of shadows. This example taken many years ago, and I was testing out a lens, and I was wandering around the Eastern Shore, and I found a burnt down, I think I found out later it was an auto repair place, and all this like rusted burnt metal, and I think this had been punched out in circles for some reason, and I loved the way that it was throwing the shadow on that stained concrete behind it. So there's this really strong play of texture and shape, and then the shadow of those shapes. Simplicity and minimalism. I would say that the best abstract photographs don't try to do too much in any one image. One of the main purposes of abstract art is to make a really singular statement with your image. Oops. I don't know why I did that. Oops. There we go. Sorry. So the best way to, you don't want distracting elements in a photo. Distracting elements tend to take you out of the abstraction. So, when you eliminate features that don't enhance the mood or the feel or the intent of the photo, you can come up with something that's really effective, but it might be very clean and uncluttered. So try to say what you want to say with the least amount of visual information, while still making an interesting image. And there's a balancing act there. If you can leave the viewer curious, leave room for a variety of interpretations, then it can be really interesting and successful and mysterious. This photograph I took in a plane flying over the Gulf of Mexico, and it would say something very different if I had included a ship in that water. It could still be a really effective photo, but it would convey a different message. As it is, this photograph has really been a successful licensing opportunity for me. And I think it's partially because it is so simple and can be interpreted in so many different ways. And funny thing is, it is used on a book of poetry, and the title of the book is How to Avoid Large Ships. So, composition. And of course, composition is so important in all photography. Some abstract photos have a sense of chaos, but in many of the most effective ones, there is some inherent structure. There's a visual anchor in the form of some point of focus or interest, or some organization to the photo, some element that keeps the eye moving in a particular way or draws the eye in. So even though there's this really strong tradition of breaking the usual photographic rules in abstraction, it still benefits you to pay attention to some compositional best practices. The rule of thirds can be really helpful. There's often a point of visual weight or a sense of balance. So considering how you're going to frame elements like patterns, shapes, and colors, geometric compositions can be very effective. Thinking about how colors contribute to the structure of your image can also help. Paying attention to the corners and the edges of the frame too. Even putting your main element of focus on the edge of the frame can enhance abstraction. So, thinking about maybe what the negative space in your image says, and try composing a scene with differing amounts of negative space to see what the effect is. All of those things can have different messages in your abstraction. And this photo was taken on, it's another rusty surface on, I think it was a tractor trailer. The trailer part was abandoned somewhere on the side of the road in Pennsylvania. And this detail is actually very, very small. This is taken with a macro lens. This is only a couple inches wide. And when you see it up close, I've done some large metal prints of this. There's so much texture and lots of things going on in it. There's a potential for visual chaos here, but I think, in framing it the way I did with this sort of, these different panels of differing textures, it kind of helps lend a little bit of structure to what could be a really chaotic image. Intrigue. Abstract images are intended to evoke an emotional response from the viewer. So I think that really starts with what happens in the head and the eye and the heart of the photographer. So when I'm exploring for photos, I'm seeking moments of wonder and intrigue. And when I spot something through the viewfinder on the screen of the camera that makes me say, oh, wow, I usually know I'm on the right track. Doesn't always work out that way, but often it does. And sometimes I find that a little visual clue in the form of a small detail can actually enhance the effect of the abstraction. And in this case, this photo is taken in Utah in an area of petrified wood. And I'm up close again, once again, macro lens. This is very, very tight. There's that little juniper berry down in the bottom third of, it's kind of nestled in a little crevice there. That juniper berry it's like a little anchor in the image. It draws your eye. It's somewhat recognizable. It starts to give you a little hint of the scale and a clue as to what the subject is. Distance can also be a really powerful component in the creation of abstract images. As you've seen, I use my macro lens a lot. I tend to get closer and closer to things in order to bring to light details that aren't apparent from far away, particularly when it's a subject that most people just don't look at up close. Get close to things. Zoom in to eliminate those cues in the scene that give reference to the scale of it. Macro lenses are great, but you can use any kind of lens in my experience. But they can be really great for capturing these very small details that when they're enlarged, they sort of confuse the eye with this false sense of scale. If you crop a little bit to leave out backgrounds and extraneous information, that can really enhance the abstraction. And this is a stalk of bamboo, and I just love that little bud that almost looks like a little reptilian eye opening up. So, and conversely, moving away from a subject can help use space to distort perception and make subjects seem perhaps smaller than they are in reality. Aerial photographs can be a really great example of this. Drones can be great for exploring the possibilities of that. This was taken in the Palouse out in Washington State, and it was taken in the fall after all the harvests had occurred. So a lot of the fields had already been plowed and harvested, and some of them burned. And I was really having fun playing with finding compositions of the textures and the shapes that eliminated any of like the buildings, like the barns or roads, and just focusing on those shapes and colors and forms. You know, when you look at it without any of those clues as to the scale, this almost looks like it could be corduroy, some sort of fabric. There's a textural effect to it. So scale can work in different ways. So some ideas and hints for creating abstract photos. These are some sort of techniques that can be helpful. One of them I would think of as a picture within a picture. If you usually work is seen in a landscape frame of mind, and I think a lot of us do, especially people who, of course, love landscape photography, or people who are starting out in photography. I and this is how I kind of got more and more into abstraction is, try photographing the landscape as you normally would. This was taken in Antarctica some years ago. Capture the wide scene that you like, and then try either changing to a longer lens or zooming in with a zoom lens to explore the scene further, to see what the smaller options are in the scene. Find new compositions in that picture that you already captured. Whoops, and I don't know why it's zooming out on my screen. There we go. So this is a photograph I took after I took this one. So depending on these segments of the scene that you explore, you can find some interesting abstract details. And note that by shifting your attention by just inches can really, yield different results. Oops, it keeps zooming on me. So, going from that, which is, lovely, but it's very representational, to something like that, it's just a different approach that's more abstract and more mysterious. And some people even will use like a card with a window cut into it, sort of a makeshift frame to help isolate portions of the scene that they're looking at from its surroundings. And that can be really helpful if you don't naturally gravitate towards looking for details, just to help you see those things. Use screens. Try shooting through things. Textured glass, fencing, fabric, window shades or curtains, industrial screening, all kinds of things can be possibilities for creating abstraction. Play with the depth of field. Try focusing on the screen itself and throwing the background out of focus, or vice versa. You can actually get an angle to the screen and see what happens to the subject if you look at it straight on versus at an angle, and what happens to the background versus the screen. There could be some interesting illusions that happen then. This photograph was taken through a panel of very wavy old antique window glass out in California, and it was a temple of some sorts, and you can see little hints of, there's a fence up in the upper left corner that's a little clear, but I was really just kind of playing with that, what was happening to the colors and the forms when I just, photographed through that wavy glass. So shooting through things can be really, really fun. Working your angles. Try changing your angle of view so you're not always looking at subjects from eye level. Look up, look down, try, getting down on the ground and shooting from there, or from high above a subject, on a ladder, on top of a building. The whole idea of abstract photography is to break away from the literal. So anything that you can do to look at things from a different angle, literally from a different angle, can help unlock your mind's eye. So, when you're walking around looking for photos, make sure you look up and look down. This mysterious little these gems were I spotted these in a lighthouse where it was built before they ran power to that part of the island, and as you walk up to the very top of it, they had these glass they're called vault lights, I think. These glass pieces are set into the top so that it would let light into the working area underneath and the stairway underneath. And people thought I was crazy, going up the stairs because like, oh, look at that, and people are just trying to get to the top of the lighthouse. But I was I was pulled in by these shapes and knew I had to photograph them. So looking up and looking down can really be very fruitful. Intentional camera movement and blur. I'm seeing lots of ICM, intentional camera movement these days. I think it's really been popular lately. And that's where you move the camera itself. You can zoom in or zoom out while you're pressing the shutter. Panning the camera while you're shooting can be really fun, and it can get some interesting results. Long exposures to create blur by using a slow shutter speed. In this case, moving water. This is in a stream, a waterfall. That can be really great opportunity for abstraction. And you can also really render almost any moving subject abstract by keeping the camera still while you capture something going by, any quickly moving subject, anything from a bird to a bicyclist, if you use the right shutter speed. So even capturing movement blur can be great on windy days. Try working with the movement of plants and leaves and the wind rather than trying to fight it by trying to freeze the movement. This is also a great approach for nighttime photography, light trails from vehicles, carnival rides, neon lights, even light painting, using those long exposures with light sources to create streaks or lines. All these things are ways to, incorporate sort of that movement sense into abstraction. Selective focus. I think I keep hitting my mouse. Sorry. Selective focus is another, thing you can experiment with. I don't know why this keeps happening. Try experimenting with a very tight depth of field with one small area of the image in focus and the rest soft. This can be really great with certain lenses that give you a nice bokeh, that soft sort of, those really lovely points of light behind this. This is a plant, and I'm afraid I don't know what kind of plant it is. It was at the National Arboretum. I'd have to look back to try to figure out what it is, but I love the effect of, the blue sky and those golden points of light with just those little spiky shapes are in focus. You can even experiment with shooting a subject completely out of focus. Christmas lights, are a great subject for that. And it'll get really abstract. I think it's really challenging to get compelling photographs that are entirely out of focus, but consider it a challenge, should you choose to accept it. I do know some artists who do it well, so play with it, have fun with it. Look for shapes and forms, not subjects. Try to turn off your left brain. That's the part of your brain that's the judging part of your brain that's tasked with recognizing and naming objects like, this is a car, this is a teacup, this is a tree. Instead, try loosening your mind and engaging that right brain, the creative side, to see not the object itself, but what's inside the object. What are the lines, the colors, the shapes, the forms. Try to get what you're actually looking at. And then notice how the elements and relationships change as you change your distance, as you change your aperture, as you change the depth of field, your angle of view. Explore those possibilities. Sometimes an entire other world starts to show up when I forget what I'm actually looking at. This detail was on uh, an old farm truck. I was coming home from Longwood Gardens one time up in Pennsylvania, taking some back roads, and I spotted this old blue truck with all this yellow scraped off paint too, and then this crack in a bumper, which, when I got close up to it, it's almost like some creature in flight. So, let your imagination really run with these things. Use a variety of lenses. As I said earlier, I use my macro lens a lot. It's great for abstract photography. I use a 105 millimeter macro lens. It's one of my favorite tools. It really lets me get close to small subjects, and really, you know, explode that detail, and eliminates the distractions of background, without having to crop, and it captures great detail. So even commonplace items, and this is a fern, can really look surprisingly different when you see them up that close. But don't discount the possibilities too of exploring abstraction with a wide angle. See if you can create abstraction even, in a composition that uses a 24 millimeter lens. With a wide lens, as I used here, and getting close and angling the camera up, you can sometimes get these really great long leading lines that create a big swath of pattern. This is out in the desert, and an area out near White Pocket in northern Arizona, and there's beautiful rock, these fins, these delicate rock fins, and I was capturing those, and I left that branch up in the top of the frame just to give a little hint, a little clue as to the scale of what we're looking at. Texture and pattern are a really great starting point for abstraction. Getting close to a subject or moving to an extreme angle can really bring out texture and pattern, and they can sometimes even make, a pretty commonplace object look like something new. Side lighting on a subject can bring out texture really well, but sometimes soft light, like what I was experiencing for this photograph, on an overcast day, can pull out a more subtle take on texture and pattern. And pattern is pleasing to the human eye. We humans like pattern. Our brains like pattern. We're drawn to them, and we tend to find them appealing. However, repetition and pattern are most interesting in a photograph, usually when there's some interruption to the pattern. And in this case, when I photographed this scene in the desert, with these layers of rock, I chose to include, like in that last photo, there's just a little bit of, that sagebrush in there that kind of gives you, again, a little anchor in the photo, a little hint as to what it is, a little hint as to what the scale is, that this is a large area and not a macro. So it's, again, there's some mystery, but you've got some clues. Post-processing is really important, and I think, sometimes you can take a fairly straightforward photograph and then really render the magic in the post-processing. This can really be where the image comes to life. So, experiment. Don't worry about going overboard until you feel like you did. The great thing about digital is everything is reversible. So, play with adjusting the exposure, the contrast, the cropping, rotate the image. If you took it landscape, maybe try flipping it around so that it's in portrait mode instead. Distort the images, to your liking. Have fun with it. It's all part of the craft. So I don't tend to alter images in other ways, like adding or adding saturation, or doing anything too extreme to it. I do like to show things as I saw them. But this image, I did add a lot of contrast, and it really brought out that sort of gold form that's in there amongst all the blue. When you look at the original of this, it's much more. It has way less contrast and way less. It's almost hazy in comparison. But I wanted to really make it, almost look like a sun there. So just something to think about when you just want to try punching something up and see if that adds a level of abstraction. I also think that cropping is really overlooked. I think a lot of people are very purist about they don't want to crop something, but my motto is crop with abandon. You've taken the photo, you get to decide what to do with it. So I do, sometimes I think the best composition is, a little tighter than what I shot. And, it eliminates something that doesn't add to it. So I do crop a lot. And sometimes, when it comes to these more abstract images, I do rotate things upside down or change the vertical to a horizontal. I've had people buy prints from me and say, I really want to hang this way and not the way you showed it. I'm like, great, that's fine. I don't mind that at all. So, play with those things. Color or not, try playing with the saturation or the color temperature in an image. Adding saturation can sort of create another level of unreality. Changing the color temperature can push a subject more into abstraction. I find, however, that really converting an image to black and white often has the effect of really simplifying a composition and focusing all the attention on the forms and the shapes in the composition without the distraction of color. Sometimes an image will feel too busy or not quite right in color, or the color is too obvious or too garish. And the image actually comes to life when I take all the color out and focus everything on the shape and this is a leaf, this is a palm leaf. And somehow in its original shades of green, it was just sort of green. It was just so obvious, and pulling all the color out of it really made it work for me. I felt like it takes on almost a more sculpture or architectural feel with that change. So don't be afraid to play with that too. So, experiment, have fun. The point is really to, not take it too seriously. You don't need to use, your DSLR to make great abstracts. You can, have fun with it with your smartphone to do studies, experiment. It's just a great practice for your eye to notice these small details and moments. Use your phone camera to capture them. I'll see something interesting sometimes when I'm out for a run or a walk. I'll take images with my iPhone, and if I see something really compelling, I very well may go back later with my real camera and really explore it further. But this is a water glass on my nightstand, and I woke up with the light hitting it one morning. So I was like, that's really cool. And just iPhone snap. So keeping an eye out for those details, and getting away from having to take it seriously. Break loose of your usual formulas, break your own rules, just keep your mind open and receptive. I think it's really important. It's ideal to begin with subject matter that is particular interest to you. I think it's really worthwhile to explore subjects that you think should translate well. You can try photographing what you've seen work for other people, but I think it's really worth remembering to choose what's compelling to you as an artist. It ends up resonating more with you, and as a result, more with your viewers. Clearly, I have this affinity and fondness for details in nature and details in these, abandoned man-made things, but, explore what speaks to you. Innocence of eye has a quality of its own. It means to see as a child sees, with freshness and acknowledgement of the wonder. It also means to see as an adult sees, who has gone full circle and once again sees as a child, with freshness and an even deeper sense of wonder. I try to keep that childlike sense of observation, try to keep my eyes and my mind open to the possibilities around us every day. I think a lot of us photographers, really, a lot of us that never turns off. But I think we can always explore other ways to keep it in mind, keep it open. We can seek out these abstract possibilities in specific subject matters, and I'll give you some ideas here. This would be an example of sort of, everyday objects. Like, as you go about your day, the truth of the matter is that abstraction can be created out of literally any subject, if you're looking close enough. Start at home, in your usual places, grocery store, out running errands. Look at usual things in a different way. And this is one of the carts at Home Depot. I was out running errands, picking something up, and I just saw this great scratched up peeling paint and this pattern in the cart at Home Depot, and thought, that's a cool little sort of Argyle pattern. So, household objects, like tools and textiles, all these things, as you go about your day, can have possibilities. Ephemeral subjects like fire, water, substances like oil or paint can yield interesting abstracts. Even anything that kind of disappears quickly, like fish, birds, insects, they can all sort of convey a sense of movement, a feeling of impermanence and wispiness. Water droplets, bubbles, they can be fun and challenging as well. This is water in a stream at Great Sand Dunes, late in the afternoon. So you're getting the great play of shadow and light in there. Architecture can be a great opportunity for graphic compositions and abstraction, indoors or outdoors, varying your angles for different perspective on things that we see all the time but don't necessarily notice, stairways, doors, details that are created by light and shadow. This is a ceiling in Albuquerque that I thought was very cool. Botanical subjects, plants, flowers, exploring the textures of backlit leaves that's a big thing for me, but also like tree bark, stems, all those subjects can have lots and lots of opportunities. And try using a really shallow depth of field with, to heighten the abstraction with some of these subjects. This is moss, very close up. Really fun for, shooting flowers or plants in a creative way that makes them less recognizable. It's not just a flower, not just a leaf, capturing the veins in leaves or just the curve of a flower petal rather than the full form. These very fine textures and forms can be really interesting and abstract. Rock, stone, earth, mud, all these things, sand. The earth has lots of possibilities. Try isolating these earthy textures. You can find, contrasts of rough and smooth, angular or curved lines, playing with a sense of scale to enhance the abstraction. Unexpected color and shading can be interesting too. There's a detail from out in the Utah desert where this area was in the shade, so it ended up looking very blue because of that shade, and I just kind of went with that to further the abstraction. Landscapes have possibilities, hills, mountains, seascapes, beaches, forests. If you start by eliminating the sky in your compositions, and then, again, like I said earlier, with that photo of the iceberg or in Antarctica, isolating a portion of a landscape can give you a very, abstract result, or one that leans to abstraction, uses the tools of abstraction. And in this case, this was at in Michigan, Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore, taken from a boat, and the sun was setting, and that form that you see there is an arch, and the sun was shining on the rock on the other side of that arch, which gives you that great little bit of contrast between the warm and the cool tones. Weather conditions, ice, snow, rain, there are possibilities with all of those to explore abstraction. I've been really into photographing little details in ice for the last few years, and this is one of these little ice bubbles on the edge of a nearby reservoir. Reflections, watery reflections, you can explore how things reflect in not just water, but anything reflective, mirrors, glass, metal, plastic. I played around one time with photographing some objects on some mylar to see how they would turn out. So play with, anything reflective and see how it can change the nature of a pretty straightforward subject. And this was a staircase reflected in the water in a wharf in a marina, and the little lights that were glowing, they were backlit. People and animals, you don't necessarily think of those as being abstract. They can be really challenging to make truly abstract, but concentrating on the forms, the textures, the gesture, and parts of a body, of an animal, or of a person can be really effective. If you really want to see some amazing inspiration for that, look at the work of Connie Imboden, Imboden. If you're not familiar with her, she's a Baltimore-based artist, does incredible, incredible work. How striking it can be. She has a whole body of work exploring the human form, photographed in a dark swimming pool and photographed with mirrors, and creates very surreal reflections and abstracting the human form in a really striking way. In this case, in photographing these zebras, this was in Zambia on safari, instead of, trying to get all of the zebras and, take in the whole scene, I really was focusing on just that form, and the pattern of all those stripes, and that one zebra's head kind of poking out of the middle of it. So, it's clearly a zebra, but the treatment has elements of abstraction. And this koi fish, I think, was another good example for, I've photographed a lot of koi over the years, and this one, I really like the way that I captured this one from behind. The form is less obvious. It's all about the tail, and it almost, to me, looks like one of those parrot tulips. It looks more botanical almost than like a fish. Anything that excites me for any reason, I will photograph, not searching for unusual subject matter, but making the commonplace unusual. Edward Weston. So, we get a little bit into the, sort of the X factor, the elusive of what makes an abstract photo work. Where does the magic come in? I think these are the four more intangible components that give an abstract image that additional element that makes it particularly appealing or resonant. Harmony, mood, mystery, and vision. Harmony is the sense that the elements in the photo create some sort of visual balance or a pleasing proportion. It can come through as a sense of cohesion, maybe a sense of movement. And this is accomplished through careful composition, also a color palette that is cohesive, a sense that the eye moves into and through the image in an appealing way. I would, pay attention to whether an image feels harmonious through the use of color. Does it feel balanced? Does the eye jump around or flow evenly? The elements in a harmonious image don't fight for visual attention or confuse, or if they do, you want to make sure that that effect is intentional and it's meant to evoke that kind of emotion. And that leads us to the next intangible component, which is mood. Mood is conveyed through the forms, the light, the color, the texture, the composition of the image. In abstraction, there's no recognizable subject that conveys mood. There's not a smiling face to depict happiness or something that's overtly sad. The mood is generated by the light, bright versus dark, harsh versus gentle. Consider whether the image conveys mood through color, warm colors versus cool colors, vibrant colors versus subdued, textures that are smooth or rough, hard or soft. All these help create a different mood. Composition tools can help create mood as well. Balanced versus imbalanced, dynamic versus static, busy versus simple, all convey mood in an abstract photograph. This, for example, I consider a pretty moody, slightly dark photograph. The color palette, the grittiness of it are really kind of contribute to that. It's a detail on a rusty old bus in a scrapyard. By contrast, the mood of this abstract, taken in a kind of similar type of location, completely different mood. You've got bright colors, you've got movement, you've got contrast, and it's much lighter and happier, so to speak. So, be aware of how these choices help create a mood or spark an emotion. These dynamic lines and bright colors create a much different mood than that previous one. Mystery is really important in creating an abstract. Mystery helps to trigger imagination, and yes, it can result in an optical illusion. An abstract, might ask more questions than it answers. It might suggest or hint, but ultimately, to a large degree, it leaves it up to the viewer to engage their sense of imagination. And I'll answer the mystery of what this is. I love that it kind of has a feel almost like a galaxy or something space related, but it's a crack in an old, busted, rusty truck, where that crack in the window started to let in those bubbles of air and moisture, and they take on a whole different appearance. And it's a very mysterious image that is not immediately obvious what the subject is, but I like that mystery. Vision is having in mind what ideas or concepts you want to celebrate through your imagery. It's clarity of intention. Lines, shape, light, texture, they're all worth exploring for their own sake, but you can go even further by developing and cultivating a vision that addresses a larger concept or an idea that's appealing or meaningful to you personally. And I think this can really help make your work that much deeper and ultimately lead to a cohesive body of work with a strong statement that you might want to exhibit or publish. Sometimes the vision, I think, isn't clear at first until we've taken a lot of pictures and reviewed them and discovered common threads and themes. So a sense of vision can take time to develop, but it can be really rewarding and help give you more focus and direction. This image has a bunch of lichen that had grown on an enamel pot. This was in a farmhouse in the middle of Missouri when I was driving through, and I got permission from the owner to photograph. They had lots of rusty old signs around, and this little detail I just thought was so interesting because it has both the decay of the man-made being taken over by the nature. So it kind of has both of my main fascinations in one image. And as I did mention, two of my main photographic aims are celebrating beauty found in these objects that are otherwise seen as eyesores, like this rusty old car, and also exploring the quieter, smaller moments and places of natural beauty to go beyond the sweeping views and the postcard pictures and find something more surprising or maybe disorienting. And it can be really challenging when you're in a place that's well known, famous places like national parks that have been photographed millions of times. This photograph was taken in Grand Staircase Escalante in Utah, which I took the broader landscape pictures too, but I found this detail right underneath my feet very interesting. I enjoy that challenge of finding something that not everybody else will see. Sometimes a photograph looks nothing like the thing photographed. To photograph is to transform, and there are many ways to bring about transformation and many kinds of transformations. A photograph is never the thing it represents and never just a photograph. John Paul Caponegro. So the power of abstraction lies in the creator and in the viewer. For the photographer, abstracts can be found literally anywhere. So exploring abstraction can be a great way to work one's eye and adapt when conditions aren't ideal. So I will often try to take a challenging or a less than perfect weather situation or light situation as an opportunity for a new way of looking and seeing. This picture was taken in the middle of the pouring rain. I got very wet taking this series of photographs, but it's another detail in a busted old rusty vehicle window, and the window had broken, and then all these great texture and shape and color was just showing up, and so I not much I could do to photograph a lot of other things that day, but this subject worked out very well. We're taking, we're living in this time with all these possibilities. We're taking lots of photos all the time. We've got these phones in our pockets in the form of our smartphones. So, experimenting with all of these things is so simple now. It can be so rewarding. So, exploring and discovering is an incredible freedom. I'll sometimes even just grab my phone if I don't have my real camera handy, just to work my eye and discover visual surprises. It's all part of a larger practice to keep my eye engaged. And abstraction is a great tool for practice in seeing fully. So a successful abstract has the power to sort of stop the viewer in their tracks. And then engage their mind with mystery. That challenge to the viewer can be a really powerful thing to keep the eye and the mind engaged for more than a second of two, especially in this age when we're more saturated with photographs than ever. Everybody's swiping through Instagram feeds, and anything that is not immediately recognizable and has that element of mystery does have the power to slow somebody down, to slow the viewer down, and get more attention and more thought. This photograph of a boat and its reflection taken in a marina in Dundalk, I had a visitor to my studio last year who sat and looked at this picture for a long time, and her friend and I were chatting, and I asked her if she had any questions. She said no, and she finally said, "What is this?" And I explained it to her and pointed out the horizon line where the boat meets the water, and her friend was like, "Oh, I see it." She could not see it. Well, she bought a print of this image. It is on her wall, and she still does not see the boat in it, but she loves the photograph. So it can be a powerful thing. So an abstract photo can be the original subject, or can be the side of a boat, a building, a stone. But the metaphorical content is what each viewer imagines and sees in their own mind's eye. The viewer might see, an alien planet, a face, a figure, a grove of trees, and is what I always see in this image. So the perceptions are really only limited by the imagination of the viewer. And I sometimes find it interesting, to learn what viewers see in my abstract photos. It can be a little bit of a Rorschach test. So, in a sense, the abstraction can be an opportunity for a conversation between the creator and the viewer. The viewer gets to define the subject, no matter how unexpected or fanciful the ideas might be. And it can be a really lovely opportunity to step away from the literal and the realistic. There can be a meditative quality to abstraction, both in creating it and in viewing it. And both activities, we're making ourselves present. We're literally focusing on what is before us and the possibilities in it. We're forgetting expectations of what the actual object is, and instead focusing only on what this two-dimensional field in front of our eyes is conveying, even if it is an illusion. So, some questions to ponder as you make or you view an abstract photo. Where is this image taking me? What are my emotions looking at it? An abstract photo asks the maker and the viewer to approach the work with this sort of willingness to believe, with an open mind. And it requires us in a way to sort of set aside judgment and immerse ourselves in a little bit of an alternative reality that we get to define. So an abstract work can require the viewer to participate in this kind of a suspension of disbelief. Just as we can suspend disbelief while we're watching a movie and we become emotionally invested in the story and the characters, when we're viewing art, we can also become deeply engaged, in what story there might be in the abstraction. It can help take the viewer to another reality. This is a close-up of kelp on a beach in Vancouver Island. Now, a lot of us, especially photographers, we tend to be a little bit of, detectives by nature. We often like to sleuth out whether, we can figure out what the subject is when we see an abstract photo. I find, photographers really want to be able to do this. But, we can enjoy the abstract photo as an opportunity to show how good we are at figuring out what the subject is, but convincing the viewer to follow the thread back to reality and guess the original subject is not really the point, unless you're truly interested in engaging with the viewer that way. A guessing game can be fun, but, once the mystery is solved, is there something still there to engage you? It's like one of those, the games in the kitchen years ago. Tell me what your object this is, and it turns out it's like a butterfly wing or something. So, sleuthing out the origin of an image doesn't necessarily reveal the artist's vision or give insight into their motivations. Instead, try thinking of abstraction as a tool to spark the viewer's own associations, their emotions, their memories. Is the image still compelling, or maybe even perhaps more compelling, if the mystery of its origin is real? And this is the test of art, not only abstract, is whether a work is able to evoke a feeling or resurrect a forgotten memory. Does that feeling linger after the first viewing? It's this idea of discovery, of experience, of awakening something in the viewer. And that connection is what makes a work truly successful. And the more people who awaken to a vision in a photograph, the more universal its appeal is. And this ability to tap into people's reactions is really about our shared human experience. It's a point of connection to others. And I think that's a really beautiful notion, particularly about the practice of creating art, which I think can feel very solitary and isolated. And this photo, for that reason, I showed this photo. This is probably my most sold print. I've sold large canvases of it. It is a detail in a birch tree.
Excuse me, Janet.
Yeah. Hmm.
You seem to have a loose microphone or something's rubbing against something, and it's
Oh, are you hearing it? Okay.
yeah, I am. Yeah, I don't know if you have.
Oh,
Are you wearing a
okay.
lav mic or something that's must?
No, 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 nope. Are you hearing it okay now?
I'm hearing you fine. Yeah.
Okay, okay. All right. I'm just wrapping up, so I hope that wasn't doing that very long. I think I might have had something hitting the mic. Maybe my notes might have been hitting the mic on the laptop. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So, as I was saying, that this photograph, it's a detail in a birch tree in Vermont, and there's something about the colors and the form. Um, it is a bit abstract. There have been people who wondered if it, glanced at it at a small size. They wondered if it was a map of some sort. There's something about this that has reached a lot of people, and that universality, I think, can be a really wonderful thing. That abstraction can tap into that. As photographers, we must learn to relax our beliefs, move on objects with your eye straight on, to the left, around on the right, watch them grow large as you approach, group and regroup as you shift your position. Relationships gradually emerge and sometimes assert themselves with finality, and that's your picture, Aaron Siskind. And I love how that sums up what we do as photographers. It's a process of discovery and it's a process of connection. And that is another detail in the ice from the streams where I hike. And that's it. And I'll be happy to answer questions if anybody has any.
But that was very informative, and love your images.
Thank you.
Fascinating. That's a fascinating presentation there. Golly.
Thank you. There's a lot there.
Yes, there certainly is. You know, I follow you on Instagram, and
Yes, I recognize your name. Yes.
yes,
It's
and
you. It's you.
you know, uh, one of the things I like to do, especially if it's a photographer that I like, I like looking at their individual images, obviously, but I like to look at the screen and just look at the entire grid. It's like about 15 pictures, and see how they all kind of play together.
Mhm.
Your grid is one of the best ever, I got to tell you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks very much. I really
And the
appreciate
other thing I wanted to, do you, your quotes from these photographers are fantastic. Do you have you had shows and things where you put all your pictures on a wall in a gallery or something? When you do that, how do you use words? Okay.
Oh,
Do you
that's
use those quotes from those photographers, or
actually, it's
do
a
you
really
have
good.
like a one word for every photo, or
Oh,
what do
it's
you do?
it's a good question. I I don't use a lot of words when I exhibit. Um, I always put together an artist statement, a project statement
Mhm.
for whatever exhibition it is. I struggle with titles a lot because I kind of don't want to give away too much. I try to make the titles a little mysterious,
Mhm.
when I'm showing something more abstract.
But you do give your photos titles, though, right?
I do,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, kind of. It's not my favorite thing to do,
No,
but
I
I do.
imagine it isn't. Yeah.
Some people love that, like oh yeah, and the titles are very poetic, and I struggle with that.
Yeah.
Um, but that probably means that I could do more work on writing. around my work. I've started to do some, um, and I think it would be really cool to do a book, not with a lot of writing, but with some
Yeah,
talking about my process and talking about what I do, and that might unlock a bit more of.
yeah. I was a photojournalist, and
Yeah,
our slogan was words and pictures working together. Okay, and
absolutely.
I mean that's what we did. That was the goal. But with your pictures, man, I got to tell you, that's a whole nother world. Um, and I just wondered if you were concerned about that. You know what I mean? And it just seems that you really are.
I think there are opportunities to do more than I currently do with
Yeah.
words and the images. But thank you.
Do you have any exhibits on display now other than up in the gallery? I know I went to one of your galleries when it was at a local um,
The most recent one was
place in
at
Pikesville.
Baltimore Hebrew. Yeah. I don't have anything up right now. No. And I don't have anything lined up at the moment.
Well, I
But
would encourage anybody who is on here to basically to check out her gallery up in the Romaselser Tower too, because to see her prints in person, there, particularly the metal ones, and quite astonishing.
Is that only open on Saturdays? Is that what I'm hearing?
yes, but if you ever want to come visit, just send me an email and we can schedule a time. I'll meet you there and anybody who
Okay.
wants
And
to.
what are the hours on Saturday?
11 to 4.
7 to 4. Okay.
But I'm happy. I schedule visitors, whenever somebody wants to come see stuff, which is nice because then you don't have the distraction of or the, interruption of other visitors coming in and you can focus on, spread out prints that you want to see. And it's kind of nice to have it all
Yeah.
to yourself sometimes. So feel free to email if you'd ever like to come visit.
By the way, I never did see that boat. Okay. The
What's
lady
that?
that had the lady that liked the pictures, there was
Oh,
a
the
boat.
boat?
Didn't see the boat. I never saw the boat. But the other picture early on, I saw the hat in the
Yes.
rusty car. Okay. And at first I thought it was a hat.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I
There
missed
was
it.
a felted hat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Mm.
how it looks to me. I sometimes I hesitate to tell people like what it looks like to me because I don't want to like,
Yeah.
you know, I
Yeah.
want I want to see what other people see in it without my influence.
Right. No. All right.
Well, I call it the influence of the pareidolia effect.
Yes.
Whatever you see in it is what you see in it. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to say your work is beautiful. It's really inspiring me to start looking uh, out there more critically. I really admire your body of work.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Truly excellent.
Thanks.
So I hope everybody has taken some of these words to heart and to inspiration. Because actually I based our December theme on basically your presentation tonight to go out and try to look at the world a little bit differently and have.
I want to see those abstract Festivus shots.
Yeah, there you go, exactly. Yeah. I still got an old aerial up on my roof, so
Time for the airing of grievances.
yeah.
I'm inspired, but I'm also petrified.
Nah, have fun with it.
Okay.
Well, again, thank you very much for agreeing to be our last presenter of the year here. As we try to look forward to the next one.
Oh, thank you. And
And keep us posted for any gallery events that you're going to be having too. If
definitely.
I know I'm on your email chain somewhere. So yeah, as soon as I find out, I will let everybody else know.
Great. Appreciate that. And if anybody wants if you saw my contact information in there too, you can always, my website is being rebuilt. It's a little out of date, but you can still reach me on that contact form if you want to sign up for my newsletter, my infrequent newsletter.
Okay.
I do send out announcements when I've got a show coming up or something like that. So anybody who wants to be on the email list, you won't get spammed. It's infrequent.
Okay. Anything else, anybody? Well, with that, again, thank you very much, Janet, for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
Take care. Thanks.